Breaking news, the Newsoms may be under federal indictment. At least that's what he says. We'll talk about it this week on Next Round. Welcome to the Pacific Research Institute Next Round podcast. I'm Tim Anaya, PRI's Vice President of Marketing and Communications, and as always with me this week is our friend, Matt Fleming. How are you, Matt?
Good, thanks.
Are you wearing a wire this week?
I'm not. No, I'm not wearing a wire, unfortunately.
Well, people may be wearing a wire with Gavin Newsom if we believe what he says on social media. So here's the breaking news for you. Yesterday, in a social media video, of all social media videos, the governor came out and decried the witch hunt from the Trump administration and said that he has it under good authority that people are talking, federal agents, FBI, U.S. attorney, who knows, are talking to his friends and associates. He says that he and the First Lady, who he calls the first partner, will be, they expect subpoenas sometime soon. So here's what we have learned from reporting from Sacramento Bee and other outlets of what this all may be about. So allegedly, it's about the behested payments. And what is a behested payment? I'm sure before you worked in the legislature, you had no idea what a behested payment was.
I had no idea, and I think to the best of my ability to explain it, it's when a lawmaker asks or directs donations from some group like PG&E or Verizon to a charity of their choosing, but a lot of the times it's charities that they have ties to.
That's exactly right. So sometimes they make a nonprofit and they direct, the Gavin Newsom Fund for Children and big entities that, they don't do it to curry favor with the governor, but it's amazing how many people who have business before the governor or the legislature write big checks to these nonprofits. Sometimes they're legitimate nonprofits that legislators raise money for, and it's a lot of paperwork. If you're the governor or legislators, you have to report all the donations. And their donations, it's important to note that you asked for. So you asked the entity to make a donation. And so the first partner has several entities. So, she's a filmmaker. And she has an entity called the Representation Project. And there's a lot of work about gender and promoting feminism and things. She's made several documentaries about this, and I think they do a lot of events and things related to the issues. So according to the Bee, she makes about $161,000 from the Representation Project. She also has a production company. It's called Girls Club Entertainment. And since 2015, according to the Bee, the first partner through all of these entities has collected about $3 million pre-tax in salary payments and contractor payments to her company. And when we were saying the entities that give money to this kind of an organization, it's since 2021 investigation from the Bee found that there were $800,000 in donations from entities like PG&E, AT&T, Kaiser Permanente, big companies and associations that have business before the governor's office. Then there's another nonprofit called the California Partners Project, which advocates for, quote, gender equity across the state. Now, I don't know how the work of one is different from the work of the other. Maybe that's part of what's being investigated here. And the governor has solicited about $4.8 million worth of donations to this entity since 2020, including a big check, $1.8 million, from the Indian tribe behind the Grattan Ranch and Casino, the big casino that has grown in operations in recent years. And on top of all that, we had the governor being fined $31,500 by the FPPC. The FPPC, the Fair Political Practices Commission, is kind of the watchdog over campaign donations and spending. And
I guess they're in on the witch hunt.
maybe they're in on the witch hunt. They are fined by for 36 donations that the governor solicited but never reported. So there's a lot at play here. There's certainly the legal issue, which all of our reporter friends who have been covering this, nothing has been confirmed by the U.S. Attorney's Office or the FBI or any federal law enforcement entity. It's kind of standard practice in those cases. Interestingly enough, I think if you go back to this year's PRI Sacramento conference, we had as our kickoff speaker Eric Grant, who's the newish U.S. Attorney for Sacramento. He seemed like a pretty mild-mannered, good public servant. He did not seem like someone who would be initiating a witch hunt to me. So, Matt, what do you make of all of this kind of hullabaloo? Do you think something is at play here, or is this kind of a communications and public relations effort by Newsom?
And correct me if I'm wrong, this wasn't something put out by the federal government. This is Newsom being proactive, saying, hey, these people are looking into me, right?
That's right. He made a TikTok video, perhaps. I don't know where they released these videos, where he was wagging his finger and bemoaning the witch hunt and telling the president to lay off his wife and, all that kind of, the no kings rhetoric and, all of those sorts of things. So we only know about this from Newsom. Reporters have had the, quote, unnamed sources, right, who are saying that things are being investigated, but we've had no public confirmation that it is.
Yeah. Look, on one hand, maybe Newsom really is upset that he feels Trump is going after his wife. Certainly, he wouldn't be the first husband or partner to feel that way, right? At the same time, it does feel like Newsom is just trying to either get ahead of this and spin the narrative, or he's trying to just gin up some more press. He wants to look like he's a fighter, and now he can sit there and say, like, Trump is coming after my family. It's good for fundraising, which of course he was fundraising off of it yesterday. And I guess he doesn't want to talk about the budget.
Right.
So
we will talk about that.
We'll
next.
talk about the budget, yes. But I mean, Newsom doesn't want to talk about the budget. He only wants to talk about things that he thinks promote him on a national level to Democratic primary voters.
Now, was he fundraising for his campaign entities, or was he campaigning for raising money for a legal defense fund?
I think it was just for his campaign. I didn't see that it was for a legal defense fund, although that would be awesome. If he
I
was
believe
doing
you
that.
can accept unlimited donations if you establish a legal defense fund. So you can expect.
Well, he could have been doing it for one of his scammy nonprofits.
That's
so,
right.
yeah.
That's right. It's the whole thing is interesting to me. It seems like the things that we're reading about in the paper. You wonder, well, what's the there? It does seem he may have a point about. Is this kind of ticky-tack stuff that they're going after? Maybe records weren't filed properly. There's allegations maybe there's some tax issues involved here. It would seem that you'd go after this and really look into this if there was quid pro quo. That's often the case in cases like this.
Or some kind of fraud, falsifying records, something like that. That's what his former chief of staff got in trouble for, and that's what sort of seems to have prompted these investigations, if you will.
Now, the one thing that is interesting in these cases, right, is that this is in response to several complaints that have been submitted to the U.S. Attorney's Office, one of which is related to the prosecution of Dana Williamson, who you just mentioned. And remember, she's the governor's former chief of staff, just pleaded guilty to fraud and lying to the FBI. And often when you make that kind of plea, that comes with stipulations that you're going to talk in other cases. So you wonder, does she know something that she's talking to the FBI about?
While Newsom was not implicated in any of those, it was his chief of staff and people in his orbit. So it's not totally inappropriate, especially if there are whistleblower complaints, for the Department of Justice to be looking into this. It doesn't matter who the president is, they should be looking into it. And the investigation into all the people who just pled guilty did start under President Joe Biden. So it might not be a witch hunt. Maybe if there is something there and they want to get 60 years in prison, you could say maybe that's a little bit political. But it does seem like this is entirely appropriate for them to look into these things. And again, they haven't charged him with anything. This seems to be something where he's just trying to do this either to get ahead of it or just to get attention.
Now, what do you make? I thought it was kind of clever, this strategy, right, of, you break the story on your terms. You come out shaking your fist and, all the stuff about I'm not going to let him go after my wife and how dare you and all of that. Newsom has been kind of quiet on the national stage since the endless book tour ended. And, he's actually been kind of governing, dealing with the budget here. So one makes you wonder, is this a way of revving up a hot summer of political activity from Gavin Newsom? Because you got to think the kind of angry progressive base will love something like this. He'll get potentially a lot of sympathy on the national stage from progressives nationally who would be aghast at something like this.
Yeah, there's some political strategy to it. I will say he was in D.C. recently.
He was there for the correspondence dinner that weekend.
He was there for the correspondence dinner.
I don't think he went to the dinner.
And he was also in, he went to Davos.
That's right.
But I'm with you. I think that there is a narrative that might appeal to people that he is trying to build, and looking like a fighter again appeals to Democratic primary voters. And truthfully, him coming out and saying this is all political, at least in terms of a political fight, now if there was going to be an actual real investigation and charges and prosecution moving forward, then it would be up to the president to have to argue against why this isn't political. So there is that advantage of getting out there first, and then the other person has to prove against your message, as opposed to this just being happening. And then, after the fact, Newsom saying, "Oh, this is just political." Then you just look guilty and you're trying to get out of it.
You can almost picture when Trump is asked about this, right? It'll be, he's Gavin Newsom, he's a slime ball, all the things that the language that he uses.
Trump would be smart to not say anything about it.
That's right. We know he will not be able to help himself. He will love this, but Newsom does have a point, right? When there have been some cases that the Justice Department has prosecuted. John Bolton is one example, right? Where, there were some ticky-tack kind of things that warranted a federal prosecution, but they weren't prosecuted on the merits of the case. They were prosecuted because the president expected they would be.
No, that's true. And truthfully, the same thing happened to Trump in New York with the real estate deals. I mean,
it's a common thread, right, that we talk about when one side or the other behaves badly, breaks a norm, breaks a social norm, breaks a political norm, the other side, when they're in power, takes it to the next level and makes it much worse. And I think you're kind of seeing that here, right? That I think all of the Trump prosecutions during the Biden era, there was some there in some of the cases, but a lot of them were kind of ticky-tack cases, political, really kind of a threat. And now you're seeing the tit for tat in when we talk about the Justice Department engaging in lawfare. I think it's sadly now becoming a common practice for whoever the other side is.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to, it's not whether or not these people, anybody has done anything wrong. It's, is this something that's usually prosecuted? Is this something we actually normally make a big deal out of? I mean, look, we would probably say if it's illegal, you should prosecute. but there's not always the bandwidth and the will to do that. And then once there is actually enforcement, how severe is the enforcement? There's a difference between, Dana Williamson under President Newsom might have, a $100,000 fine and, 6 months in county or something with, 5 months suspended or something like that. Right. So there is a difference there a lot of the times in how these things are treated. But, a lot of the stuff that Trump was accused of, hush money payments to a porn star, it's unseemly for sure, but it felt political. The whole thing felt political.
That's right. And of course, we end on the note, Governor had $17 million in behested payments in 2025 alone. So it's not illegal, but you kind of wonder where there's smoke, is there fire?
And I remember, help me, I didn't look this up, I'm just remembering it now. There was an issue, actually this happens all the time with the behested payments, and they're always kind of scummy. They probably have kind of a real purpose somewhere in there, but most of the time it comes off as very insidery and very scummy. There was an issue with Eleni Kounalakis, I believe it was Eleni Kounalakis, in like 2019, something like that, right when she was first in office. And I'm pretty sure special interest groups were like using behested payments to refurbish her office as lieutenant governor. I remember my old boss, Cynthia Bryant, wrote an op-ed about it because when she worked for Governor Schwarzenegger, she did something where she was trying to curb the abuse of behested payments. This was a pet issue that she really cared about. But it always comes off as really, really, it just looks like access trading.
Right, it's the same with the tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, interest paid to the White House for the current, well, we don't know how much progress is being made right now, but the reconstruction project, the building, the Trump ballroom, right, the arch, I think, is supposed to be built with private funds. But it's the same kind of thing, right? All of these people are writing $10 million checks, $5 million checks. Well, what do you expect for that? You're not just a good citizen who wants to build a White House ballroom, right? You want to get access and curry good favor to the governor, the president, a legislator, whoever it may be.
That reminded me too, the Trump accounts, the $1,000 for kids who were born from 2025 to 2028. Those just opened recently, and they were due to, who was the tech, not Bill Gates,
oh, yes.
Dell?
I think Michael Dell, yes, wrote a big check.
And with something like that, like, I do think that it's possible if you have that much money that you might actually just think, I think this is a good thing that I can do.
I think that
it's possible.
Because I watched him give the presentation, when they announced it. I think he sincerely believes in the cause.
And you can have mixed motives too, right? Like you can think like this is good for me, but this is also a good action to take. Like charitable giving, we get tax breaks as a result of it. So there is something we get out of it, but we also might believe in the cause. So it's possible that with the behested payments, someone could just legitimately think that the lieutenant governor's office needs to be refurbished, and but they also want access to her. For why you'd want access to the lieutenant governor, I have no idea. I mean, they do nothing. But anyway, so there could be some mixed motives, and I don't want to just impugn the motives of every person who's given a behested payment. But there is definitely something that seems like it's trading access.
When I worked in the governor's office, our suite of offices was in the Department of Finance, and which is outside of the Horseshoe, which for those of you who aren't Capitol regulars, that's where the governor's office was before the rebuild that's going on. And we had a wall that bordered the lieutenant governor's office, and there was a door there. An alarm would sound if someone from the lieutenant governor's office was going to go in there, and I always wondered, what on earth is going on in there that we would need an alarm between our office and, at the time, Cruz Bustamante's office? And we would always imagine Cruz Bustamante was not the thinnest of people in the world, and when we'd hear strange noises next door, we always wondered, is it lunchtime in the lieutenant governor's office? But exactly right. Anyone who's worked in those offices knows they are not the fanciest of offices. So I think we don't begrudge the lieutenant governor a coat of paint every now and then, but should you really be in government at all for we're going to get a fancy office remodel every 4 or 8 years?
Yeah.
Well, let's go from one kind of payment, behested payments, to payments that we're all making, and that's the taxes we pay to fund the state budget. So I don't know that we have white smoke. We sure have a lot of red ink. But the profiles and courage that are your state legislature, as of this taping, we're taping on Tuesday the 16th, they, quote, passed the budget bill yesterday on June 15th. And now you may wonder, well, why did the legislature pass the budget bill when there are some big items remaining that they have not reached agreement with Governor Newsom on? And of course, under the law, which was changed by voters about a decade and a half ago, the reason that they passed the budget on July 15th and actually go through the process of sending the budget bill to the governor is that if they don't do so, they won't get paid. So we have a budget which John Laird, the Senate Budget Committee, this is what he said about it. He said that the deal takes, quote, a balanced approach. And he said that, our state faces some hard choices in this budget, but you wouldn't know the hard choices when you look at the amount of spending in the budget, the tax increase proposals, and really the punting of tough decisions to the next governor. So Steve Hilton or Javier Becerra, whoever wins, is facing a budget that's kind of a house of cards budget. The legislature now has maybe 8 or 9 days to kind of come up with a deal with Newsom, because the final budget bill has to be in print 72 hours before they vote on it. So got to have a little time to write it up, vote on it, and send it to the governor to sign it. This does not seem like the finest budget the legislature has ever put forward. What are your thoughts on the big budget vote yesterday?
Well, it's not the finest budget, but it doesn't stand out as the worst. I mean, they've had plenty of terrible ones. I like the framing of it being a balanced approach when they do nothing to make cuts. They do nothing to ensure success.
And a lot of the cuts, by the way, that are in the document are kind of
they're like fake
premised
cuts.
on, we used to call them trigger cuts. If this doesn't happen, these cuts will take place, or they're delayed until later in the year.
Or it's like a projected growth and then they've cut that. So the cuts are never really real. Spending in the state has increased more than double, if I remember correctly, since Newsom's been in office. Certainly nothing has improved. We just keep spending more money.
Are we 90% or 100% better than we were in 2018?
Not even a little bit. And, again, they don't make cuts, and sometimes that becomes its own sort of like bumper sticker cliche. But I guess what I mean is there's no chance that every single program is still fulfilling a valid purpose. There's no chance that every single program needs to grow or doesn't need to be shrunken in any way. It's like even if you're running like a household budget, there are times where certain expenses just shrink. Where you're like, oh, I got to kind of cut back there, and then other ones need to grow, and you kind of make way, and it's a little bit of a give and take. There's really none of that here. There's just sort of like creative accounting and whatever they need to do to get that paid. Yeah. And then they raise taxes, which they're raising. Two of the most prominent ones are ones that will increase everyone's healthcare costs.
So that'll be good for their stated goal of addressing our cost of living.
Totally, yeah.
Problems.
That's part of their balanced approach to
Yes.
cost of living, and then the other one is there's a minor deal on allowing tax write-offs for research and development, which is particularly big in pharmaceutical industry where it costs a lot of money to bring innovative drugs to market.
So the home of innovation, we want to have all the innovation.
We're
in
so
California.
innovative, all these patents.
So we are, and we're a state where we innovate things and then we manufacture them elsewhere. That's a whole different issue. But the one thing we do have here is innovation. We're going to make it more expensive to innovate.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're the home of biotech. We're the home of tech, and that's all Newsom brags about, that and the Nobel laureates.
Yes.
But yeah, they want to just,
Roll up the welcome mat.
I think everyone agrees that innovation, there has a lot of trial and error. Trial and error is really expensive. And that's what this R&D tax credit is about, is there's a lot of testing and trial and error that they do. And some of it is wasted in a sense that like it produces nothing except for a learning experience. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just a tech and biotech thing. A lot of groups banded together to like push for this tax credit to remain in place, but they only gave a temporary stay of execution. It's still, I think it's up for renewal again in 2028 or 2030, something like that.
And the biggest fight that is yet to be resolved, and I don't know how they're going to resolve it, is this fight over Medi-Cal cuts. And the most extreme left of the Democratic legislators, they want to have dental coverage for the undocumented. Most hardworking Californians don't get free dental coverage, but the undocumented would under the Democratic plan. Governor wanted to have some more kind of asset limits so that really to limit the people who would be eligible for Medi-Cal. I think it's going to be a rough 10 days for them to try to figure out a common ground here. Usually the governor historically has the upper hand, whoever the governor is, in budget negotiations with the legislature. How do you see a way forward here?
Newsom just has to find a way to punt this. Newsom just has to find a way to punt this to appease special interest groups long enough that he can get out of office and run for president without being encumbered by the fact that free health care for undocumented immigrants is financially unfeasible, it's politically unfeasible, but it appeals to a certain core constituency in the Democratic Party. And it's not just Latinos who care about this. As a matter of fact, it's probably more progressive white liberals who care about this more than Latinos.
Of course, we know from our work in the Assembly, the budget is they call it a messaging bill, right? And a messaging bill, in this case...
It's a statement of priorities.
Statement of priorities, right? And so there's a lot of rhetoric on both sides of the budget debate. And of course, the Assembly's trying to frame their raising people's costs of living and the other, kind of poor choices in this document with a messaging document that they sent out to members last week and which Politico obtained. And let me tell you, it sounds like if we were Democrat staffers, we might be writing something like this. They said that Democrats should discuss their vote for the agreement publicly by saying that, quote, Trump's disastrous cuts, failing policies, and attacks on health care and the safety net are the reasons we're in this mess. Let's be clear about who started this. And Trump picked this fight with California. We're not backing down. Although I will say Donald Trump didn't run up nearly double state spending in 8 years and kind of reckless, unsustainable budgets and fiscal priorities we can't afford.
I mean, that's true. Like, they're not entirely wrong. Trump did make significant cuts to federal payments to California and other states. That part is factually accurate. But a lot of it is predicated on this idea that California wants to give free health care to undocumented immigrants. And they're doing that purely to prove a political point, not because they believe it's good policy, although some of them probably believe it's good policy. And Trump is saying, okay, point taken, I'm cutting funding for these programs because, tax dollars should go to citizens and not to undocumented immigrants. And no matter what you think of that policy itself, I mean, California, as they say, is writing checks that it can't cash. And
that's right. Now, I would differ with you on the Trump line because we've built in years of budgets that are unsustainable. Yeah. So if these are your priorities, then you need to afford them. You can't expect that the federal government is going to pick up the check for a lot of these things. And that's a problem with state budgeting overall, right? Is that, hey, you can give out all this free stuff, but if you're not generating the revenue to pay for it, well, the budget comes tumbling down like a house of cards. And when you have more and higher taxes in your own budget document, well, how are you going to grow the economy and grow the revenue to fund all of your priorities?
Yeah, I mean, Trump's right. I mean, the state keeps bragging about having record revenues. Great. Why is Alabama bailing out California's policy decisions?
Let's turn to the campaign trail. Not a lot this week. The one big bit of news in the governor's race this week is that Steve Hilton put out his tax plan, and he talked, kind of built upon the tax plan that he was talking about in the primary. So his new plan that was announced today, your first $150,000 of taxes or of income would be tax-free. And so someone making $150,000 a year, which sounds rich but really isn't in California when you consider the cost of living, that'd be about a $5,800 tax savings. Family earning $200,000 would save about $7,300 annually. Over 150, it would be a flat tax at 8%. That's certainly a step in the right direction as far as tax policy. When you look at the polling where he starts off the general election at 31%, it's probably a bit of an academic exercise, but it's a contrast on policy that you want, and it's encouraging to see he's running his campaign on policy ideas, on lower government, lower taxes. Certainly Mr. Becerra seems like he's going to run his campaign on Trump, 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 Trump. I don't know. If I were him, I don't know that I would do much different than that. What do you make of, making tax policy a big issue for Hilton in the governor's race?
I don't know how much Californians at large make a connection between the decisions made in Sacramento and their pocketbook. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Meaning on spending and...
Yeah. So I think this probably sounds good to a lot of people. I don't know that it sounds as good to a lot of people as Steve Hilton might hope. Personally, I think that people should pay taxes. Maybe not the most bottom, but bottom incomes, but people should be contributing to the system in some way, maybe just lower the entire tax burden for everyone. It doesn't come with any offsetting cuts that I'm aware of, so you're going to be losing a lot of income. You got to make it pencil out somewhere.
He's going to have his own budget challenge.
Steve Hilton's challenge is to make this race local. Becerra's challenge is to make this race national. If Steve Hilton could make this local and about things like California tax policy and other California issues, I think he has a fighting chance. I don't think he has a strong chance because he's fighting a lot of political trends that are going against him, including massive voter registration deficit. But he has a fighting chance if he can make this about California, because I think that you can see across the board California is failing in so many ways.
Finally, as we close, we're kind of we're a couple of weeks away from July 4th, America's 250th birthday. PRI, and a bit of shameless self-promotion, we have a terrific series of new videos that you can check out on our website at pacificresearch.org. And we wanted to highlight, not necessarily, folks in powdered wigs, though we do have one, but we wanted to hire some unsung heroes from throughout our history who contributed to 250 years of American exceptionalism. And so we have videos on things like, John Muir's campaign to save Yosemite, all the great fast food people that really invented fast food here in California.
Hollywood,
right.
Silicon Valley.
Many interesting people, some you may not have known about or known much about.
Junipero Serra.
That's right, Saint Junipero Serra. And so, in kind of thinking about that, and as we're getting in the mode of the 4th, we had, I guess some people billed as kind of the kickoff to the nation's celebrations in Washington, which was this is President Trump's 80th birthday on Sunday, and we had this star-crossed affair, if you will, that was really a UFC cage match. And, you know, if you like that sort of thing, this was, you had it all in this. I mean, there was certainly, I watched some of it on TV. There's great production value in it, but it was, you know, the thought of, it evoked memories, right, of the Roman Colosseum, right? And is it really kind of the way that we should be leading into celebrating the 4th of July? You know, that you have this kind of cage match in front of everyone, and then, you know, you've got the honor guard and all of that. And of course, there was a lot of, you know, unfortunate things done and said at this event, including one of the contestants who won who said, you know, Michelle Obama is a man. I don't know what that has to do with the fight or the 250th, but I don't know. Kind of watching it, I felt a little discouraged for kind of where we're at and where we're headed going into the 4th, that a president really should be using this occasion. This is the most unifying occasion we've had in decades. And it seems like we're going to have another kind of in-your-face, thumb-in-your-eye kind of celebration, and that would be very unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, from a UFC perspective, it was a great card. A lot of really good fights, a couple of championship fights.
It went on and on. I didn't think the thing would ever end.
They usually do. And honestly, the after-fight interviews go crazy a lot of the times. There was one, I remember my favorite was someone dedicated their victory to all the victims of Marxism throughout the world.
Well, that would be better. That gentleman should have said that.
But I'm just saying, like, they go off the rails pretty quickly. Yeah. The one about Michelle Obama, it's inappropriate. She's living in his head. She hasn't been in office in 10 years, 12 years. Or she was never in office, but you know what I mean.
Dare I say.
Yeah, I mean, it's inappropriate. I mean, you have this amazing opportunity where you just had this massive victory for America's 250th on the White House lawn in front of the president who you like. You have this amazing moment in your life and you waste it with something so stupid like that. To me, I just don't relate to that. But I love UFC. It shouldn't be on the White House lawn. It just shouldn't. There's ice skating there and Christmas tree. And that's kind of what should be there, and past that, really nothing else.
Usually for the 4th of July, and
yeah,
things like that are okay.
Just having grown up in Northern Virginia, just outside of D.C., I just have to say, like, the D.C. 4th of July, I don't know what it's like now, and actually I'm kind of curious, but it was so awesome going there as a kid. You know, you get there out on the mall, and you have, like, a picnic, and there's, like, bands and stuff, but you're just where there was, like, so many people, thousands and thousands and thousands of people, just as far as you can see, you know, fireworks exploding. It was just this awesome cultural event. And of course, as I got older, getting to enjoy just getting hammered on the lawn, watching the fireworks, you know, It was so awesome. And I loved it so much. And I just can't even imagine that still having the same vibe that it used to.
On that note, we're going to start thinking about the awesome events we're going to get hammered at this July 4th, maybe. And we hope you will be doing the same as well. We want to thank you for tuning in for this week's edition of Next Round, and join us again next week for another look at politics and policy from a free market perspective here in California. Thanks again.